Good morning and welcome to this week's Jump recruitment discussion. This week we're going to attack one of those really sort of thorny questions that have been hanging around for about the last 20 years, which is always about, do you outsource some of the human processes in recruitment to a third party, and what would you do if you did outsource those sections, let's call them. Okay, so this week I'm joined by Joe Jahal. Joe Jahal is the co-founder of Jensen Cobain, which is an outsourcing company. Joe's got 20 years experience in the UK recruitment industry. Started off with Brook Street, so lots of people remember Brook Street. Then 10 years at Adecco, worked with a couple of small agencies. Before about 10 years ago, setting up Jensen Cobain. So he's been in the market for a long time and seen lots and lots of changes in the market in a long time. This week from Jump, I'm also joined by Heather. Now Heather's really going to be interesting on this because Heather spent an awful lot of time at her last company, Engage, outsourcing quite a lot of their human recruitment processes. So again, we've got quite a good spread of what's going on and how it's worked. This week, as always, I would normally start, well, not normally as always, I'd start with some stats, but it's always difficult to get stats on this type of process because the stats that it normally churns out for you is for RPO, and we're not interested in RPO today. So we're going to start with straight in, and we're going to work straight into the questions from there. So Joe, thanks very much for attending. Joe, you are in India at the moment, so it's 40 degrees, so I can understand why you're in a t-shirt, where we're still at 4 degrees, but it is a spring 4 degrees, so it's looking good from there. So good luck. I hope the connection stays with us for the whole 40 minutes. So let's start. Outsourcing the human elements of recruitment. It's been around, as we said, an awful long time, but there has been some significant changes in the processes that clients are now benefiting from. What would you say, Joe, has been the significant change from when outsourcing first really sort of came about to what it looks like now?
Yeah, so morning, everyone, and thanks for the invite. I think there have been significant changes, Howard, but I think more significant is people's understanding of outsourcing. So yes, there have been some technical improvements, and I'll touch on that. But I think there's more significant is the actual acceptance, understanding of what remote working is, which is essentially the same as outsourcing, albeit via a third party. And I think, like outsourcing, if we look at remote working, not everyone can do it, not everyone's made to do it or wants to do it, and not everyone should outsource. So I think that's the sort of thing that people need to sort of bear in mind. But the times of not even 10 years ago, I'd say 5 years ago, I'd spend an awful lot of time educating people about outsourcing. And now they kind of get the concept. It's more now about the sort of trust, what exactly can be done versus can't be done. And the IT improvements, the fact that, as you mentioned, I'm 4,000 miles away, we're having this conversation. And funny enough, I've had more outages at home back in Essex when I'm working than which is a true story. My staff take the mickey out of me. But yeah, so I think it's more about the concepts, and there weren't that many good things to come out of the pandemic, but one has been people understand the remote working concept, and that's what outsourcing is.
Yeah, I think that's really true. I just support that because I remember the very first time one of the big, huge kind of well-established outsourcing businesses came to talk to me about it, and I really struggled to understand what they were talking about. You know, the concept wasn't familiar. By the time we started doing this kind of 5 years ago, many more people had tried it. There were a lot more case studies. The technology had enabled it, and then of course the pandemic absolutely accelerated it, and so it's become a much more familiar concept, and there's not the same level of fear perhaps as a result of the stability of the technology and that understanding of remote working we got from the pandemic. So I think those have been the really big changes, Howard, you know, that tech change and the mindset change in that we understand the concept of remote working in a really practical way that we didn't before the pandemic.
So it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because I've tried it, I've done it, I've failed with it, I've succeeded with it, I've had all sorts of different results with it. And I think lots of agency owners, and I speak to agency owners about this quite a lot, because obviously there's a shortage of staff in the UK, and how do we get this, how do we do that? And I'm saying, well, why don't you think about outsourcing? And one of the things that they say is, they're really fearful of the quality of their service is going to be diminished if they outsource it. Certainly if they outsource that human element, the fear of that quality is going to diminish. So if you looked at that, Joe, how would you put a business owner's mind at rest about the quality of the service, and what has changed since the early 2000s to now about the quality? Let's exclude the technology side. We know that that's there, but it's about the human quality and the human interaction.
Yeah, I think it's a very valid point, and I think it's a very valid concern. But I guess it's no different from making any purchase, or whether that's a service or a product. I think you've got to do your due diligence. And I think the best way of doing that is testimonials. As you said, Howard, you personally outsource, you've tried it, it has worked, it hasn't worked, but there's a lot of success stories. And again, it's I always say, in the good way, there are good recruitment companies, they're bad recruitment companies. Outsourcing's no different. So it's about doing due diligence, testimonials. And so, for example, I know that you guys have worked with other outsourcing companies, some good ones, perhaps some bad ones as well. That's not taking my word for it. We have live named testimonials on our website. But I think more to the point is that one of the things that, if anyone on this is looking at outsourcing, is you're paying for a service, but you're also paying for an experienced person. So, for example, I've got guys and girls here that have got between sort of 5 to 7 years of recruitment experience, and that's what you're paying for. So whoever you're engaging with, that should be one of the questions as well, is that you're not just getting a bum on a seat. What's the experience of the person? Who have they worked in my country or with my competitors? And that's also, all information that's available. But I think the biggest one that we actually do, and I'd encourage anyone to do, is really understanding what's the scope of work here, and how is that agreed together. So the very first day that a client comes on board with us, we issue our scope of work document. And quite simply, that's a 12-week workable program of what's going to happen in week 1. Yeah, how are we looking to partner together, and what are the results that we're expecting on week 1? Then defining that process, and quite simply, I'm sure everyone on here knows it's a simple tick box exercise, but it's then allowing which side of the partnership is keeping to their deal and who isn't. And it allows, going back to that point, Howard, on the quality, it's not about waiting 12 weeks to see if this works. It's making sure that the outsourcer is doing what they said they would do on day 1, week 1, as well as the outsourcing company as well, the client and their obligations. So it's something, the quality has to be constantly reviewed, the KPIs agreed as a partnership, because although I know it's a bit cliche, but I'm only successful as an outsourcer if my clients become successful, if we can help them improve their business. So that's the quality aspect, and making sure that it's not as simple as just signing a contract and waiting for results. It's taking ownership and reviewing that on a regular basis with the outsourced company.
It's interesting, isn't it, that word testimonial comes out an awful lot, and I've started to really sort of work with my clients on a simple view of the testimonials, and it's all about the values and the purpose of the business and how they're delivering that to their end clients. And you go on every recruitment agency website, there's loads of testimonials, there's loads on ours, etc. And most of those are because we've gone and solicited the client and asked for a testimonial. What's interesting, Joe, is that I'm speaking to quite a number of clients. Some are using your service, absolutely, and what they're, without even being asked, they're giving me an unsolicited testimonial of the quality and what they're getting from that process. And I think your comment there about setting those KPIs out early and then tracking those KPIs to make sure that the client is getting what the client is wanting, in the timescales and how you deliver that. And I think that's a bit that really lots of people, when they first started doing this type of, outsourcing, failed, because they failed to set the right KPIs and failed to have the right agreements in place. And I think once that happens, then that testimonial becomes unsolicited because they're seeing the uptick rather than we're just using this. And I think that's a very big difference from, lots of recruitment agencies who have lots of testimonials on their service. It's that unsolicited testimonial. And I've had that from 3 or 4 clients, not just from one. It's from multiple clients. So it sort of says now that that marketplace is starting to move and move in a certain way that says the quality is there, but we still have to work at the KPIs and work at the service and how that service is outlined right from the outset.
Because that transparency and really good and clear communication about expectations, it's what makes things work in all situations, not just outsourcing, isn't it? We're just replicating what's really good practice. Let's be really clear, communicate, measure the right things, have the right expectations, and be really open with each other.
Well, I think I'll go back to what I said a couple of weeks ago about we were talking about KPIs in management, and we were talking about some of the management KPIs that people set. And what I said, you've got the key performance indicator, but I think in this side, the key performance indicator is really important. But I think the other KPI that we've talked about was kept promise index.
Yeah,
and I think this is a real area where that kept promise index is really important because, Joe, you can deliver a kept promise to the client on what your service, but your client also has to engage in that service as well and drive that kept promise index back. And I think that's where we start to see the dovetail of the two services come together and work. So if we looked at that and said outsourcing, should be more cost effective really than recruiting your own staff in most areas. So if we looked at that, Joe, which areas of recruitment do you believe should be the most effective to outsource and why?
Yeah, good. I think really every company is and every business owner has different requirements. But I always say, start with the ones that are your biggest problems. Problems are opportunities. Yes, they can be a headache, but they're things that are either broken or need improving. So the obvious ones, I mean, we're all recruiters here and we all want more candidates or more jobs. Candidates and resourcing seems to be probably the number one request that we have come through, quickly followed by compliance. But it's not just about categorizing, it's really looking at where are the pinch points in the business that if they could be fixed would give the biggest return or the quickest return to fix those things. So I think that's, to every business owner, is the most cost effective area that they want to have fixed in their business. So it's anywhere along those lines, and then applying the process, there always does need to be that human element involved. So, I mean, I could touch on AI and we'd be here for sort of hours upon hours about how that's impacting. Maybe that's another topic for another day. But I think it's really just focusing on each individual business and business owner, finding out what are the pinch points in your business and what if we could fix that. Let's design the process together. And if we could fix that, it comes back to those KPIs, then agreeing at the end of week 3 and 4, this is what we are both aiming to achieve. It's a common goal to ensure that it's cost effective and there's a very measurable, and that's one benefit and beauty, because you are paying a fixed cost per service. You should know what that service that you're paying for entitles you to. So your ROI and ability to measure ROI when it's not hidden in cost, which you can't easily manage when you're employing someone. There's a lot more to it, nor do you have the time. It's very easy to measure the cost effectiveness of that entire process.
So I'm going to be a little bit evil, and I'm going to, because I like being a little bit evil. As Heather knows, she
yes, I know.
she enjoys my little evil challenges. I'm going to put you on the spot and say, if you look across your business that you talk to, which are the main services then that you find that clients outsource to you that really, really have a good return on investment for those clients?
Oh, that is on the spot, Hal, because, in a good way, because we've got some huge success stories. And there's no magic formulas. We've had some excellent perms consultant on a particular piece of business that have generated some amazing net profit for the client that they were working for. So you could argue that's a great success. On the other hand, I can give you an example of where we've worked with a very, very small husband and wife team. And they're in fact, my longest serving client, so nearly 4 years old. And literally they had 4 people, a couple of part-timers in the UK. They were really suffering with resourcing. And again, there's no magic formula. We don't have a hidden data list of candidates that exists nowhere else, but it's working with them on the tools, with it, the same tools, whether that's LinkedIn, CV Library, etc., but putting experienced people that aren't distracted with other things, because they're very process driven, and that is my role. That's what I'm here to execute. And we've gone from over 3 years, as I said, a small business into 15 people and running pretty much the entire agency for them, but still with that UK element of touch of face-to-face and the owner going out and taking that sort of responsibility. So it's a hard one to answer. And you know, we've had lots of success, but we've also had lots of challenges and occasions where it doesn't work as well.
Okay.
Yeah,
well,
and I just, sorry, Howard, to butt in on that. So I've got experience of doing this in so many different areas. I've done it in compliance, in resourcing, in human resources, in finance, in payroll, you know, in accounting, in all of those different areas. And they all have the possibility to give huge added value. But they can all be really challenging. You know, it's not a magic bullet. And the process that Joe was talking about is, for me, the real value of this is that agency owners get an opportunity with an external third-party specialist really to challenge their own process and say, what is the process? What is it that we want? What do we want to do? And how are we going to measure that it's going to be done? And then you've got some resource doing that and providing that service for you. And there can be tremendous opportunity in all areas of recruitment. And that example you just gave, Joe, where you're running the whole recruitment business for them with a little bit of client facing in the UK, you know, shows to me the power of this. But it's very individual. So it's working out for your recruitment business, what are the bits where you're struggling with hiring people in the UK, or you could hire more cost effectively somewhere else. And that's the real fascinating challenge, I think, about it. But the actual process of doing it uncovers so many things about the way you're operating your business and the way you could operate your business. So
let's look at that then in a more processed way then. So we talk about outsourcing the right business partner, the person on the owner's mind. It's like recruiting a new member of staff if they're recruiting the human element. In most cases, recruitment business owners, when they recruit their normal staff, it's like taking an educated gamble, you know, on that process. You know, so what things should a business owner have in place, process-wise, with the outsourced partner to ensure the success, and the healthy return on investment comes from, you know, engaging with the right outsourced partner, but then the outsourced employee within that partnership?
Yeah, so from a process, in fact, before you get to the process, Howard, I think, again, I do spend a lot of time talking to prospective clients, and I do get frustrated about this because I really underline that before we even discuss process, make time for it. You know, if outsourcing is an avenue that you've decided after researching, decided that you want to go down, then make sure that you're making time for it as either the business owner or the key stakeholder, and schedule it and then commit to it. It's one of those things, as the saying goes, if you try and swim, you drown. You know, so if you try and outsource, it's not really going to work. If you commit to outsourcing, even if it's a defined period of time, and that's why we talk a lot about the first 90 days is crucial. After that, if it doesn't work, but you've done it, walk away from it, you know, without that commitment. But so in terms of process, I think the first thing is, what is your current process? That's one of the number one questions we ask. What's the current process? Now, a lot of the time, why are people outsourcing and why do they, we get an emergency phone call, is because someone has left. They've taken 4 years of knowledge in their head with them, and the process manual or process document is now out of date or doesn't exist. And that's often, a reason to outsource, because it can be a quick hire and a quick fix, so to speak. So, but even if that process exists, it's about working on it jointly, looking at what the process is. And a couple of examples that I can give you when companies have come to us with an out of date or lack of process, going back to that scope of work document, it's working with them. So by the end of it, we actually have their process for them and we hand that back. So we have, working with them, devised jointly the process, handed it back, and therefore they can then train their own staff or have the reassurance that as their team expands with us, their time commitment now becomes less and less, because we devised the process with them and now we train their new staff that work for us.
See, it's interesting, isn't it? So I'm going to liken that to bringing on a new member of staff, but I'm also going from a technology point of view, like bringing in a new piece of tech. If you bring a new member of staff into the business and you do the traditional, here's 2 days worth of training, off you go, sink and swim, then we know the vast majority sink very, very quickly. And it's the same when we talk about people, what have you done with that new piece of tech, or what are you doing with your old tech? Oh, well, it doesn't get used. Well, why not? Because no one's trained on it, no one's invested on it, no one has a real process of using it, no one's making sure that process is working, and no one's checking that process. So what you're saying is that you want to work with the client, you're going to go right back to what their original processes is and what they're doing. You want to try not so much replicate that process, but improve that process and develop a better process, so when that you come to deliver, you can deliver in a far more process way that apes their business, but also enhances their business.
The way I had it described to me, Howard, when I started doing this, that really helped me understand the difference, is there are two broad models of outsourcing. One is a lift and shift. So you lift the service out of your UK business and you shift it to an outsourced service provider that you've chosen carefully. The other one is lift, fix and shift. So you lift it out, you really interrogate the process, you fix it, you improve it, and then you outsource it. And they both have their places. Obviously the lift, fix and shift enhances what you're doing, because it's really adding value and you're getting something from the process of outsourcing, as well as that experienced and talented staff member that Joe was talking about, that you've got people who really know how to do this, where sometimes it can be difficult to find them in our home country. So I think that's just, it helped me to understand the difference when it was described to me.
So looking at that then, Joe, how often do you find that you're just lifting and shifting, or how much do you find that you have to put the fix in the middle of it completely to make sure it works properly?
There's normally a large element of fix. I think people have reached, by the time they look at outsourcing, it's generally because something there is not working. And it can be, I don't like using the word quick fix, but it can be very quick to market. To get up and running and fix, knowing that there are outsourcers out there that do this day in, day out.
Yeah.
So it's generally the way. It often is used by companies, again, as time and outsourcing is progressing, people understanding that it's an enhancement. It doesn't have to be a fix because there's a problem, there's an enhancement. And going back to your point, just quickly, Howard, I think you perfectly described all of the things. Yes, working on a process, doing things, but I think there's one key difference, that when you engage with a third party, I think there's more accountability. There's certainly more accountability on me, and I think if they can be the same KPIs that a business owner would give their, let's say, their business manager or their team manager. The difference here, there's also something about paying an invoice every month and having that little bit of a service attitude that I'm paying for this, what have you done? So I'm very much accountable for the results of not just myself, but more importantly, the team, and the results on each and every project that we work on. So that accountability, I think, aids the whole process in someone taking a bullet if things aren't on track, that maybe some people find harder when someone's employed in the same office. And Heather will know from a HR aspect that they're difficult conversations sometimes, and people don't always want to have them, and find it easier if it's a supplying company.
So what would you say then are the two biggest objections that clients present you with, and then how do you overcome those objections?
I think the best thing for me is that after 30 years in recruitment, pricing isn't an objection, and I think that's quite unusual. But I think it's testament to the value for money that can be achieved. I mean, being quite broad here, but generally speaking, outsourcing can be 50 to 60% cheaper than finding someone in the UK. Broadly speaking,
yeah,
and again having all the additional on costs, etc. So that's quite nice. But I think they're probably not objections that I would see them. They're more like underlying concerns, and they tend to be. If I had to pick two, it would be communication. Again, saying that as an outsourcing company based in India. And trust, I would say. So if we look at communication, there is that element of outsourcing. It doesn't necessarily have to be to India. South Africa is an really emerging market. Philippines is an emerging market. In fact, two areas and two geographic regions that we're looking to move to, because there are certain clients. So for example, if you look at the American market, and there's about 80% of US companies that currently outsource to India. But there is a preference of more of a Latino accent, which takes them to the Philippines. So it's not necessarily about time zone. We're open here 24/7. So communication is still a concern. And that's when I meet business owners, it's, will my person be understood? And can I understand them? And very crudely speaking, the roles are divided into voice and non-voice. And it says what it does on a tin. If you're outsourcing payroll or data sheets, we've got some excellent accountants and clerks that would just sit there and it's data entry, never need to be on the phone. If you're outsourcing your business development, someone has to be very good, not just at their job, but more essentially how they communicate. So communication tends to be a concern/objective. And that trust, it's like we're all business owners. And at some point, it's like, do I trust handing over my business, which is the bread and butter of how I make money, to a third party? But we do that in many aspects of our business, how we purchase our telecom systems or whatever. So the trust takes time, and it's about, I think, Heather, you mentioned it, it's that transparency, and that's something we try an awful lot on. And it's two-way transparency. I often go back to business owners and say, look, we need to have a word with your team leader because of X, Y, or Z on how they're treating your staff. They're not my staff. I just happen to payroll them, and I happen to have very good managers to act as eyes and ears on a daily basis, managing their workload. So it's the communication and trust, but there isn't really objections that I have. It's more as I said, the underlying concerns that they may have.
And I'd add to that I'm not sure they're objections either, but I think they're challenges that you get. I certainly saw and have continued to see, so I still work with companies to support them on their outsourcing, problems coming because although that trust and that communication and that is there with the person who's leading the outsourcing project, you then suddenly get other people in the recruitment business who are involved in it who haven't yet built those relationships and don't understand, and so can be frankly unnerved at the idea of people remote from the organization being involved in their success, so working with an external resource or something. So you have to really continue to engage everybody with this. You can't assume that everybody's going to go outsourcing, hurrah. You have to work at this stuff all the time, and each new person who comes in your home business, who comes in and starts being involved in working with outsourcers, has to still, has to be taken on that same journey of understanding what we're doing, why are we doing it, how does it work, what's expected of you in order to get the best out of the outsourced service that we've provided, and really helping them to understand that if they engage well, they will get great service. And if they just chuck shit over, excuse my language, over the fence, that's what they're going to get back. I know, shake your head in disgust at me.
Heather, I'm disgraced. It's
Yeah,
disgusted.
recruiters hate that sort of language, I know. But so for me, that you've got to keep working on the relationship in exactly the same way you would if they were your staff in the same office, right? You keep working on that constant feedback loop of what's working, what can be improved, are we hitting the KPIs, is the process right, and just keep that constant communication going so people understand their role.
I think you both hit it and alluded to it and sort of didn't skirt round it, but didn't quite say it. But what you're both saying is that those outsourced staff should be treated exactly the same as your in-source staff that you're working with, and they're just managed and payrolled by the outsourced company. So the more you invest in that outsourced staff, in developing, training them, mentoring them, bringing them into your culture, making them part of that team, etc., the more you will get out of that outsourced staff.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely, Howard. And I think it's it's the number one reason for me why outsourcing doesn't work, is when the client that you're engaging with doesn't get that all we're doing is literally, these are your people, we're managing them, working with you. And it's very much when it's a client-supplier relationship. And I'll give you a very good example. So in a couple of rooms down, we've got a client, one of my clients that's worked with us for 18 months. There's two of the senior guys over, not just training their people, not just, motivating their people, but looking for improvement in their processes as well as ours. But one of the first things that they did was hand out their shirts, not the JKS ones that I'm wearing, but they are fully engaged. That's a perfect example of a client that is fully engaged with making it work and realizing that this is just they're being hosted in our office and that's it. But having said that, you don't have to come to India to do that. It's more, it's just making those people, so if we've got some great staff that have worked on the same client for now 2, 3, and even in one case 4 years. That's as long as we've been going. And send a happy anniversary, 1 year anniversary. Do those sorts of things. So it's just as if you would have, you're in the UK, but Mary is now working in Essex at home. She's still your member of staff. It's just that we've got Mary out here now. That's it. So I think that's the perfect way, as Heather said. They are literally your team, and it's under our control and direction. And that's a big difference. Sorry to go on, but that's a big difference between remote working and outsourcing. Because you've got that extra element of the security of our office and all the facilities that come with that, and more importantly, the management team dealing with you on a daily basis, not a once a week, but a daily basis should you need it.
So again, to put you on the spot then, your tagline on your website is outsourcing with a difference. So what is the difference and how does it make the process work?
I'm glad you noticed that, Howard. Very proud of our tagline. But look, let's be honest, everybody, I can go on LinkedIn now and everyone will be claiming, we all claim to be different. So there's a very nice, mission statement behind it. It's based around 3 very simple things. It's, being different with our people. That's the nice internal part. Being different with our clients, the external part. And being different with each other, the cultural part of not allowing bullies and that type of thing. So it's very easy, but like I said, whoopee-doo, we've got a fabulous mission statement. But I think to answer your question, it's about, I feel that we can back that up with example and fact. So here's the boring bit when I get to talk about myself a little bit. So as you mentioned, in fact, it's 30 years for me as a recruiter. Wow. And I'm very proud to say that I'm a recruiter, and that's what I do. I just do it for other companies now, and why we're different there is I don't think, so far as I'm aware, that there are that many outsourcing companies where the person that owns it has been a temps consultant, a very bad perms consultant. I was good at temps, branch manager, an area manager, a director of a company as well, and then also I've been a recruitment owner. I set up my own company and sold that. So. But the last thing on that, I was also, as Heather has been, I was a client to outsourcing. I first came to Gujarat, where I am now, 10 years, longer than that. It's back in 2010 to explore whether this could help the business that I was working for. So I think that makes us very different. Yeah. And on top of that, I would say, as you know, Howard, you mentioned it's 40 degrees, but it's not a tan. This is an Essex accent. I was born in the UK to Indian parents, but culturally, that makes me understand, you know, the two cultures of East and West. And it's regardless of whether it's India, somewhere else, you know, Philippines, never underestimate the cultural differences of outsourcing your service and what that's going to mean to your business. So it's making sure that you understand that. I'll give you an example of that. It's not just about how the staff here think and act. And I say this again as an Indian, India's very much, I found as well, but it can be a yes culture. So for example, if I ordered a cab from the hotel this morning and they say 10 minutes, I know it's going to be 20, 25 minutes. You know, it's the willingness to want to please often makes people say yes. And what I got fed up of as a client was not being told the truth. Whether that's, it may not have been intentional, unfortunately some of it is, but it was just making sure that we're fully transparent. And actually, sometimes I lose business because I do say, actually, we can't do that, or it's going to take a lot longer. And I'd much rather walk away from that business because of the unrealistic expectations, rather than sell the dream, invoice someone for 2 or 3 months. I want my clients to be partners and work together on this for a very long time. And so I think the final thing is, you know, I am the business owner, so I'm very passionate naturally about my own business, but also about my clients. And a key difference here, I happen to be in India this week, but I take full accountability. If we've agreed some KPIs and we're saying that we're partners, I want to see my partners face to face on a regular basis and come and do those service reviews, whether that's quarterly or 6 monthly, if my clients want to see me. And sometimes, you know, they're chasing me and say it's this quarter, and other times, you know, I can't get to see them because they're too busy. And I think that comes down to that stakeholder partnership agreement. So sorry to go on, but I think that those key factors is why I think we're very much different.
So it's interesting, what you've mentioned there is partnership quite a number of times in your answers, and we talk about partnership and how joint responsibility for both sides needs to occur when making outsourcing a success. So talk to me about that partnership and how you develop your partnership with your clients to ensure success, because we know it's, you know, some people have been very successful at this and some people have failed miserably at it, you know. So how do you make people more successful?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I said earlier, that, you know, we've grown over the last 4.5 years because of trying to pick the right partners to work with. And we haven't always got that right. But then when we do have that partner, is really trying to establish that I can only grow if I keep using Mary today, but if Mary comes on board to work for you, and is exceptionally good, you're going to want another one pretty soon. So it's making sure that we're in a position for joint success, making sure that if I don't feel that there's stakeholder engagement, that we actually walk away from that, because I want stakeholder engagement. And it's not often just from the business owner or the top person in the company. More importantly, they're often some of the challenges. So for example, you can have a business owner that is absolutely, yep, love the sound of outsourcing, let's do it. But if the person that on a day-to-day basis, if the concept hasn't been explained to them and they don't understand, often they can take that as, oh, what happens if outsourcing goes well? Is my job under threat? You know, or I like managing the team around me. So it's making sure that your organization understands And actually, every single client that we've worked with, there's never been a redundancy because of outsourcing. If anything, the outsourcing that has enabled them to sort of grow their business or fix those problems. So it's making sure that everybody understands. But from my point of view, I want to have that engagement, not just with me, and where I do get frustrated, despite warning people, if you like, it's a warning that you are going to need to invest time. As you said, Howard, if you get a brand new starter on Monday, if you sit them in the corner with a nice pencil case with your branding on and do nothing with them for 12 weeks, it's not going to work. Similarly, if you judge someone within that new starter within 12 weeks without giving them the training, it's too early. You can't tell. So you've got to give it time. And going back to that engagement, I often have my senior managers week after week waiting for someone to join the call, and they just don't join, an online call, that weekly review. And sometimes they go 3 or 4 weeks, and well before that, we're on to the owner saying, look, we need that engagement. So I think it comes back to as you said, Heather, there's no magic formula. It's working together as a partnership, and it is going to take time. And we just say, give us at least 90 days, because we're pretty sure you are going to see results if you work just as hard as you expect us to in the next 90 days.
It's interesting, Heather, we've talked about this long, haven't we, with the management point of view. One of the things that consultants talk about managers, about one of the reasons why they leave a company is because a manager promises to review, promises to train, promises to do this, and then never does. And you're seeing the same thing. They don't turn up to those review meetings, and therefore, how do you cure a problem? How do you develop a problem? So it's interesting that it is about partnership, and it is about developing a stronger and deeper relationship with your outsourced partners. And it's the same thing that we talk about. In 2 weeks' time, we've got Bullhorn and the Access Group on talking about technology. So hopefully we're going to get some quite big fireworks between Bullhorn and Access about technology and what's coming down the line. But we'll also be able to talk about partnership and how partnership with your technology people really, really helps. And we know that is important when rolling out technology. So the last question, since you started, you've experienced, as you said, you've experienced some major success, you've had some client failures, as all companies do, etc. If you could advise a business leader then who's contemplating this route, what advice would you give them to avoid the pitfalls and the benefit from outsourcing that we've not already really discussed?
Okay, so what I've not mentioned, it's hard. I've gone over so many bits that I think the first thing I would say is emphasize, I probably have mentioned this, but please do your homework. The temptation there is to rush because there's a lovely solution at the end that's being sold, if you like, to you, that this will fix all problems. Do not rush that. But once you have done that, I think the biggest thing is commit to it. As I've mentioned before, it's really about committing to it, seeing it through, and ensuring that this is something that not only you understand, but your key people understand why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and what's the end result. It's more business, more growth, stabilizing where we are. And I think identifying the stakeholder, if it's not yourself, the business owner, identifying a good stakeholder in the business and making sure, as I mentioned earlier, that they don't have any fears and concerns. But I don't think there's anything that I can't think of anything I haven't mentioned earlier. But the strongest advice that I can give as a summary is to take your time, speak to people that have outsourced successfully or unsuccessfully, look at the reasons why, and really spend your time understanding what part of your business are you trying to fix and what are you expecting to get as an end result, and how do you work on the bits, the process in between.
I'd reiterate that and add into it, do your due diligence on who your outsourcing partner is going to be. All outsourcing businesses aren't the same. It's really important that you choose an outsourcing partner that you feel you can work with as a partner, that you feel understands the problems, who's got some experience in the field that you're operating in. And then, as Joe says, it's not a magic bullet, but boy, oh boy, can good outsourcing really help you deliver growth, but only if you put the work in. So it's not going to happen magically. It'll deliver you cost savings, but it's not going to deliver you benefit unless you put the work in the same way that you would put the work into developing a team here.
Okay, so it's, what we're saying then, it is a true partnership between the two companies, and it is almost employing your own staff to a certain degree. And as you said there, it is, whether it's voice or whether it's back office type work, etc. What is it they're trying to do, and setting stringent KPIs and then being involved in that KPI process. Joe, it's been a really insightful conversation. I always sort of enjoy sort of pushing these conversations, because I think sometimes these areas that I've tried to put into businesses in the past and failed, and now finding it really successful in certain areas and pushing with certain clients like you and I. We've both spoke to clients that I don't think haven't trusted, but haven't committed to the process and failed, and then come back and committed to the process and then succeeded. So we're seeing that commitment is really important to that, irrespective. But I think your comment there, Heather, is absolutely right. Doing the right due diligence to get the right partner is really important. So, it's been absolutely enlightening, Joe. Thank you very much for your time. I'm not sure what time it is in India now, but I'm sure it's sort of heading towards tea time.
It is almost tea time, yeah. So,
good. So you go enjoy your tea and enjoy that 40 degrees. Thank you very much. Next week, we've got a really interesting conversation. Next week, we've got Robert Woodford back from the Marketing Junction, and he's going to create 10 questions that every recruitment leader should be asking their marketing department to make sure, like we're talking here, that the marketing department delivers a really good ROI. And I said the following week after that, we have Bullhorn and Access on together. So we'll hopefully get some really good information from Bullhorn on Access about what is coming down the line from a technology point of view that can help your recruitment agencies grow and scale. So once again, thank you very much for your time. Joe, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for everyone who's joining it. Heather, thanks for your time, and we'll see you all again next week.
See ya. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.